Hey, how you doing? This is RJ. Today I'm going to ask the question, is an SJW comic book salvageable? If they had someone who actually was trained to write the comic or a good editor to give them the right direction, would an SJW comic be salvageable? Now, I don't think an SJW writing a book really is salvageable, but let's go to someone who has been influenced by SJWs and is writing a comic book and see if that, at the very least, is salvageable. Let's go there first before we go to the SJW. Okay, so I'm looking at The Life of Captain Marvel #2. Now, I don't like to do reviews on my channel just because, well, there's plenty of other people who do reviews. I like to take new books and to give them something else, to use them as a jumping off point, to ask a question. So I'm just going to tell you very quickly what The Life of Captain Marvel #2 looks like, in case you haven't bought it, because I'm pretty sure you haven't bought it because it's a piece of trash. So you have the cover, which is Captain Marvel standing in front of a mirror looking at herself and looking back at herself from the mirror as a little girl. You have, let's see, page 1. Guess what the exciting page 1 is? Well, wait a minute. We got to have the first full page of text, which is just self-affirmation for the people that are writing the book or are part of the production of the book. And then you have page 1 with Carol Danvers lying on the floor of her bedroom in her parents' home, reading a letter from her father, which makes it look like he was having an affair. Ooh, great beginning there. And then page 2, you have her black and white flashback to when her father died. Page 3, the same thing. The next page, the same thing going on with this. And then the next page, you have Carol again on the floor of her bedroom, then coming down and talking to her mother. Again, excitement, excitement. And then the next page, you finally get a little bit of excitement. You have the villain crashing into the earth. It's a ridiculous page, but I won't go into that. But you have the villain crashing into the earth. And then on the next page, you have the villain reveal. And it's just the villain is revealed right there next on that page. Then after that, you got Carol in a diner. Wow, gee, that's nothing you see in SJW Marvel comic books, is it? Sitting in a diner talking to a guy who had a crush on her when they were both young. And the next page is the same thing. And then the next page, you have back to the villain, her hitting this idiotic Canadian farmer in the nose and stealing his clothes. That's about it. Then, the next page, excitement again. You have Carol in the garden, gardening with her mother, speaking with each other. Then you have the next, and that's the same thing with the next page, gardening again. And then you have the big dramatic reveal of this book, which is her telling her mother that she thought that her father was having an affair. And then you have her mother on the next page, still in the garden, saying, yeah, she knew about that. And then standing on dock saying, yeah, she knew about that. And then you have the next page where you have Carol on the moon, pounding the moon, and basically talking to herself, which you can't do on the moon because there's no atmosphere that you can use to talk, by the way. But hey, so you have that one page of her showing a little bit of emotion. And by the way, that's the only emotion she really shows in any of this. She has a panic attack when she's lying on her floor thinking about her father. But, when they show her as part of the flashback going back to her father's funeral, not a tear, not a single tear. I mean, she's a woman, so you expect her to cry, but she doesn't have to bawl. At the very least, a single tear would be nice for your father, even if he was a son of a whatever. Anyways, so the next page, you have the villain again sending out some kind of instrument from her back in order to track down Carol. And the next page, you have just it coming back to her, telling her where Carol is, basically, and her jumping into a vehicle and then some random destruction that this villain does just because someone honked their horn at the villain. Okay, so yeah. At least you got a little bit of action, but it makes zero sense. And then after that, you have Carol coming home from the moon, and the second dramatic part of this entire book, her brother, who was in a coma, actually wakes up and says something, and Carol is all in a kerfuffle about that. Then you have the last page where you have the villain continuing to move towards where Carol is and killing some person to get their boat in order to go down the East Coast. And that is the entire book. Not joking, that is the entire book. So my question is there a way to salvage this book? Is there a way to salvage this book, not just to make an entirely new book, but to take all the elements that they're using here and actually put them together in a way that would be interesting to a comic book reader, like a traditional comic book reader? That's the question I'm going to ask here. And I think yes. I think this comic could actually be salvageable if someone would actually pay some attention and do some editing to it. I mean, if you had actual people who knew how to write an actual book, or editors who knew how to tell their writers and their artists what to do. Anyways, so let me go through this. Here's what I would say to do with this book, okay? To show, you tell me, you think this sounds like a book that you would like to read? You know, at the very least, it would be a second-tier book. I mean, I can't make it anything spectacular, but at the very least, I could make it into a comic book. All right, first of all, this cover is just her looking into the mirror, looking smug. So the entire cover, the entire point of the cover is what? Is narcissistic self-affirmation. That's it. She's standing around, she has her cat at her feet and a couple of toys around, and she's looking at herself in the mirror. I'll give it to you so you can look at it. All right, so could you actually use this motif for the cover and actually have a good cover? Yes, you could, if you actually put some brain power into it. Have Carol on her knees, slumped over in front of a lake, and have her with her Captain Marvel uniform on and a broken toy in her hands, looking into the lake, and the lake would have her as her younger self reflected back at her, crying. And if you wanted to add some dramatic tension and some actual action, put the villain in the background ready to strike her down. There you go. Make it part of the story. It's a salvageable idea if you don't concentrate on narcissistic self-affirmation. Okay? So then what do you do from that? Okay, this whole let's do a full page of text to explain the story is ridiculous. Okay, next page should be a variation on the theme of the cover. So put Carol in the same place. Basically, we use the cover as if it was, you know, I don't know, it's a dramatic picture, not exactly real life picture. So dramatic picture. But first page should be her in the same pose, basically getting up off of her knees, and actually some text explaining why she's there. She should be, I would say, put her in the middle of the mountains. Okay, so I'm using the whole moon thing that they have later on in this book. So put her on, say she flew off to the mountains and she's thinking about her father's funeral. Okay, black and white, father's funeral. There you go. And you can stick that in. So as interspersed with her father's funeral, she gets actually upset about thinking about her father's funeral, and she pounds this mountain in just big slabs of rock falling towards the ground. Since she's in the middle of nowhere, flew to the middle of nowhere. You know, there you go. You got some drama. You're explaining the entire thing while she's doing this. You got a little bit of action, and you got her showing her powers. You know, she's pounding this mountain into dust. There you go. And you can actually connect it to the extra story, which is the villain. Okay, so as Carol is done and she crumbles down again, what do you see in the background coming over her head but this little ship with the villain on it crashing towards the earth, which she doesn't notice. There you go. Right? And the villain reveal in this book is handled, it's handled so poorly. When you have it, you don't do a villain reveal by having them crash into the earth and all of a sudden there's your villain. You look at her and she's right there and you see her in all her glory. No, that's not how you do a villain reveal. How you do a villain reveal, how it should be done is, okay, the thing comes in the background of the Carol picture, then crashes into what it says Canada. It says you could pick a little more specific than just Canada. You know, there's actual places in Canada you pick up. Anyways, so it crashes into the earth. And make it something a little more dramatic. Make it something like giant armor that you can't actually see who the villain is first. It's just something that use something else in armor, because they're always using armor now. They're always using technology as if it were magic. Okay, let's say a giant bioorganic thing that is covering over this villain, so you can't actually see who the villain is exactly. It's just looks like a giant amorphous blob of we'll say mist going around this person. All right, make it something mysterious. Tie it in and make it mysterious. You don't do the villain reveal within 2 panels. All right. And then what do? You want to have the little thing coming off of the villain in order to search for Carol? Do it right there. Okay? Do it right there. Okay, so we'll have Carol far off in the distance, you know, flying off of this mountain, and this villain using some kind of telescopic vision in order to specifically target her and see her right away, but then try to fly towards her and can't because she crashed into the earth and something went wrong, haywire, and she can't fly anymore. So she portions off some of her bioorganic organism that floats around her to actually take off and look for Carol. There you go. I'm tying in the exact same thing that you did, but it becomes dramatic. Okay, so there you have the villain. And it's not a villain reveal, you're actually having some drama. And then you have Carol going back and doing some of the dramatic things that supposedly you're having in this book. They're the low parts of this book. And then you would have Carol talking to her mother and finding out that, yeah, she actually knew that her father was having an affair. And then show Carol moving off somewhere else, like to an asteroid, because they say she went to an asteroid to destroy it before. Show that, okay? She moved from the mountain to an asteroid because she's even more angry now. Show drama. She's angry. She pounds the asteroid into pieces, right? And have her flashback and, to the fact that she's angry. At the very least, there's a little bit of action there. And you can tie the villain in at the same time, because the villain was going towards the mountain to try to get to her, but then she went back to New England, and then the villain, the little subsection of the villain, has to actually go somewhere else. And then Carol flies off into the atmosphere to find this asteroid, and it has to zigzag and is slower than her, so it's specifically not catching up to her. And there you go. It's trying to track her down. You're building some tension, right? And then have Carol go back again to New England and have some of the talky parts, and then have her even more thrown by more of this drama, and then put the moon scene in there, okay? Put the moon scene in there, and her pounding into the moon and creating a giant new crater, okay? You use that whole, the whole page is her on the moon, and you don't actually show any real action. It's supposed to be action, but there's none there. Show her pounding the moon. Show her creating some giant crater on the backside of the moon or something, okay? There you go. I'm just using the elements that you're using there. And then have her go back to Earth. Now, I think that the black and white part that they were using with the funeral, that would be great. Because what they should have done is they should have made it that Carol becomes even less and less, because even less and less of color in this book. They should tie in, because like I'm always saying, you can use the story and you can use the art, and they need to work in the same direction. They can tell the story twice at the same time. Do that. But you could also use the coloring for the same thing. You could use it as in, okay, you have Carol, she's thinking back to her father's funeral, and it's black and white. And then every time Carol gets more and more upset, show in the coloring that she's leached of color and she's starting to become almost black and white, that this thing is draining her. Whereas you show the villain, make the villain extremely colorful. Right? You got your two templates for this battle that's going to go on, and you could tell it with the coloring as well. You just tie it in. Use the stuff that you already have there. You could just use it so well. I don't know why. You could. Okay, so as Carol comes back from the moon, she is in this black and white state because she's emotionally drained and she's physically drained from using as much of her power as she can to pound into the moon, because she's trying to release these emotions. And then you have the villain attack. Then you have the subsection of the villain attack, okay? Not the villain itself, but the subsection that was partitioned off. And have some action and an actual battle scene. And Carol being triumphant at the end, even though she's exhausted, and therefore she looks like a hero. I mean, this is me just thinking about this book for an hour, maybe two, while I'm swimming at the beach on Sunday. And I can come up with a story and a story layout that actually works for a comic book. How can people at Marvel not come up with a story layout that can work for a comic book? This is ridiculous. I mean, I'm taking all the elements that they are using in this book itself. All the elements that they are using, and I'm just switching them around to make it look like an actual comic book, one that has drama, one that has a superhero, one that people would actually want to read. At the very least, some people would actually want to read as normal comic book readers, right? Just us old normal comic book readers. It would actually build tension. It would actually be a comic book that we would want to we would want to see and experience, right? You can do that. You can use the exact same elements. I'm really upset with this because they had it right there in their grasp, but they couldn't. You know why? Because, well, first of all, you have someone who has no experience with comic books, because this woman, even in the first issue, she acknowledged that she really has no experience with comic books, so she can't write comic books. And secondly, it seems like she has no intention of learning how to write a comic book either. She's just taking her other genre and sticking it into this book. And on top of that, you got no editor to tell her that this is how you write a comic book. If you just had one of those three things, this could be a good book. This could be an actual comic book. But as I was saying in one of my other videos when I did the West Coast Avengers one, they're working backwards from this point. They don't want to write it as a good comic book. They have this idiotic notion in their head as they write these things. It's like, what do they call it? Like the Field of Dreams, right? Where if you build it, they will come. So they think that if they write this book, which is specifically, I would say, directed towards women, it's kind of like a Hallmark book, right? As I said when I reviewed the first one, that it's like looking through someone else's photo album of when they were young. Who does that? Old women and I don't know, cat ladies. That's who does that, not comic book readers. It's idiotic, but they think, oh no, we'll write this story for women, and once we build it, they will come, and we will get our audience because it's there for them. It doesn't work that way, and it hasn't been working that way for a while, if you haven't noticed, compared to all the other sales of comic books. If you're looking at yours and getting canceled all the time, no, it doesn't work. This book just drives me insane because, as I said, this is me thinking about it for less than 2 hours, and I can come up with a theme and I can storyboard it in my head using the exact same elements that they're trying to use and come up with a comic book that is at the very least half decent. I ranted on this for too long. But anyways, what do you think? Do you think that my idea would actually salvage this book? That it would make it, I know it's not the most exciting thing in the world, but it would make it something that you might want to read, that you might actually think would build some tension, and there would be a good villain reveal, and it might actually be something. I don't know. You tell me. So, if I gave you something new to think about, or if you like my idea of how to actually save this book, then hit like, hit subscribe, leave me a message, leave me a comment, give me something new to think about, and hopefully, we can use these ideas and get these ideas out there to help create better comic books, like our crowdfunded comic books that are spectacular coming out right now. Anyways, like I said, I spoke much too long on this one already, so I'll leave it at that. I'll see you later. Bye.